Lovely jubbly. Hello everyone. So I'm a GIS developer within the research team at Esri UK. Something I've been doing now for 2 years. So I started as a junior GIS developer 2 years ago, and then was promoted to a GIS developer earlier this year. So in a bit, I'll share how I kind of got to here. But before I do, I thought I'd tell you a little bit um, about kind of my journey, because it hasn't been, I suppose, a conventional route to being a developer, and kind of contrary to the background image here, it's not all about code. So how did I get here? Well, I thought I'd start at the very start. So I was born in Dorchester, in the heart of the West Country. Had a pretty rural upbringing. I went to secondary school nearby. I studied geography, history, and psychology at A level. So I've always leaned a bit more towards like the humanities side of things. And for a time, I wasn't sure about going to university, so I had a bit of a gap year. Mine wasn't quite as exotic as Claudia's, so instead of going traveling, I spent a year working in the local McDonald's, which was definitely an experience if any of you have worked there before, and not really for me, kind of in the long term. I suppose I had this kind of grand ambition when I left school that I would know what I wanted to do with my life, but of course I didn't. So the next best thing was what would I like to do next? What would a good next step be for me? Now, I'd always enjoyed geography, and kind of a key person in my life was a geography teacher at school that encouraged me to apply to university. So I applied to Plymouth, Liverpool, and Glasgow. Glasgow really stuck with me with its kind of lovely campus, and something about its gritty reputation as a city, and moving to Scotland sounded great fun to me. Um, so I made the decision to move to Glasgow. Now, I've always been one of those people that needs a bit of space to think, and kind of taking that year to work in McDonald's really helped me to think about that carefully. Um, so I started university in September 2015 to start studying geography. I won't go through year by year what I did, but just cover off some of the few things that I enjoyed. So I enjoyed, and this will probably resonate with a lot of you, I enjoyed learning about the world. That's what I think is so great about studying geography, is that it helps you to kind of understand and then be able to describe the world around you. So I don't think there's many other subjects that can teach you both how the dynamics of glaciers and capitalism kind of shape the world we live in. Um, and then in 2017, I was fortunate enough to be able to study abroad for a year in Bergen. It's something I'd recommend if you ever have the opportunity to either go to Norway or to Bergen or to study abroad, then I'd definitely recommend you take it. It's a great time to kind of leave your regular life for 6 months or a year, try out living in another country, and then come back to all your friends and family. Um, but at this point, I had done a few GIS courses, but was, no offense to GIS, but relatively indifferent towards it. So I got to the end of my degree. I really enjoyed studying geography, but didn't really want to carry it on in an academic setting with a master's, and I didn't really want to become a teacher. I'm sure for those who study geography, you'll be aware of this kind of well-established career path. So I knew what I didn't want to do, but I really wasn't sure what I wanted to be doing. Um, so I began doing what a lot of people with degrees do, and I applied for some hospitality jobs, and ended up getting one at a hospital cafe in Glasgow, which at the start was exactly what I wanted, a bit of money. I got to work with some really nice people, um, and a job, unlike university, you don't really have to think about it once you've finished for the day. And I'm sure you'll all remember what happened in spring of 2020. The UK went into its first lockdown. So, being in a customer service role, I was relatively quickly furloughed and all of a sudden had a huge amount of time. So initially this was a lot of time to kind of stay indoors and play a lot of video games, but once I'd gotten bored of that, which didn't take that long, thankfully, I began to think about kind of my next steps in life. I'd got that space to think, and some time to think about it as well. So in general, I'd say the pandemic was a pretty awful time, but I'm grateful for the time and the space it did give me to kind of think. So I began applying for jobs that would interest me and allow me to kind of take a step back into the world of geography. Now, there weren't a lot of jobs around at that time because it was lockdown, but a lot of the jobs that were there were GIS positions, and I did apply for a few, had a couple of interviews, but unfortunately was not successful at that stage in getting into the GIS, kind of getting responses like it was close, but they went with someone else. But then I saw this graduate position come up at Glasgow City Council, which really seemed like quite a special job. For one, it was in Glasgow, where I was already living, and it also meant working on some really exciting kind of urban planning jobs. And I got the job. It was, I'd say, a really varied position, but mostly was spent doing a lot of stakeholder engagement, a lot of kind of urban geography research, and working with kind of public health and police partners. So I got a bit of my first taste of the corporate world. So I wasn't in this job asked or required to use GIS, but when I was trying to kind of communicate my research findings, it naturally felt right to me that these be on a map. So I asked the GIS team for an ArcGIS license, so I started making maps. Eventually, towards the end of the graduate scheme, because I've been kind of working with GIS quite a bit, I was moved to the GIS team, where I became kind of a bit more embedded in the levelling up team, so doing the analysis to support those levelling up funding applications. But there was something about GIS, using GIS to kind of bring together and process disparate data sets, extract kind of meaning from them, and then communicate them via a map that I found really, really quite satisfying. And the part of that job at the council that I really wanted to take forward. Unfortunately, there wasn't any kind of chance to take that forward within the council. I say unfortunate, but it was a great opportunity in the end because I saw this junior GIS developer position come up in Esri UK's research team. So I thought, great, this will give me the opportunity to keep practicing as a geographer, not, I might say, the geographer that I expected, but it would give me the chance in the research team to play with lots of new technology and kind of influence how it would work, as well as how it could be used by organisations. And I must admit, I didn't really know much about Esri at the time. I knew I'd seen the name Esri on kind of the ArcGIS loading screens when I'd opened up ArcMap or ArcGIS Pro over the years. So I knew that they were quite a significant part of the industry. So that really covers off my journey to kind of to how I got where I am now. But where am I now, and what do I actually do? So as I said, I work in the research team. I work out of the Edinburgh office. So I moved to Edinburgh shortly after getting the job, which meant that I could kind of go into the office a lot more regularly. Like since university, I was mostly a home worker and a bit kind of fed up, and now kind of really enjoy the social life of being in the office. I'll go a bit more into what that social life is a bit later, but yeah, it's not all about work, but it is a bit about work. So what do I actually do? Well, I'm a developer, as I've said, which means I do write code, but my role is, it's not just about code, it's really, really very varied. I'm sure there's probably some of you that think of being a developer as writing code all day, every day, but I mean, it can be, but there really is, in my kind of role, not the case, and it did kind of surprise me at first. So in the research team, it's quite there's three of us, and we're all quite generalists, which suits me very nicely. I like having a varied job where kind of every day is different, and that's what I get. But I will try and explain a bit what this varied job looks like day to day. So probably the most common task we have is research projects. So these center around understanding a new technology and understanding if there is value in it for kind of our UK customers and like the UK GIS kind of environment. So the first project I had, which was really actually quite exciting, was to investigate a new Esri product that allowed users to view their GIS data in virtual reality. So my role here was to try out the technology. It was my first time using virtual reality, and did give me motion sickness at first, but that soon subsided. So yeah, my role was to try out the software, speak to colleagues that work closely with our customers about whether or not they would find it useful, and then also because it's virtual reality, it does attract quite a lot of attention because it is quite fun. So I did take it along to the Scottish conference in Perth, where we could kind of give customers or attendees the opportunity to try it out. So here's a picture of me. I think this was definitely within my first month of joining Esri. So VR is just kind of one of many, I would call, fun technologies that I've had the opportunity to play around with. I call it playing, but it's very much playing with purpose. So in the research team, we investigate technologies that are not necessarily yet being used by customers because they are new and not really yet fully understood. So this could be anything from virtual reality to game engines to incorporating ChatGPT into GIS workflows or applications. So that's what I mean by the role being a very generalist one. I've had to develop quite a varied skill set, which hasn't happened overnight. But this basically means that I can work with all types of different technologies. So when I joined, I knew a little bit about Python, but I definitely wasn't an advanced Python user. But since I've joined, I have had the opportunity to learn a lot more about Python and specifically kind of web development, which is probably now my kind of one of my specific skills. So kind of JavaScript, CSS, and HTML. But one thing I was really kind of enjoyed learning about was Unreal Engine. So that's the game engine, which I'll show you a little bit about that in a second. But then also I'm currently learning how to program Arduinos for an upcoming kind of digital twin project we're working on. Now, because the work we do is quite exciting and it pushes the definition of what people generally think of as GIS, we are quite often called upon in the research team to present what we do at conferences. So this is some game engine stuff that I prepared for a developers conference in Berlin, which I'm sure if any of you have kind of been to Berlin, can imagine how that was a really, really cool experience. Now, at first, all this presenting was, I think, as Molly said, a little bit nerve-wracking. Having only really presented at university, it was quite daunting at first. So this is a picture of me presenting at the Scottish conference for the first time. So I think this was just before I started presenting. I think Addy snapped this shot, and I'm looking a little bit nervous. But like anything, it has taken practice. I don't think many of us were born to do it, but presenting at these conferences is something I've gotten used to and I do actually quite enjoy now. But it's not all fun and games at Esri UK. Team building and collaboration is a big part of the company culture, both kind of during working hours and after. So while I've been working, I've had the opportunity to take part in lots of great activities with my colleagues. So I've got a picture here of some of my team. So I organised for us to go to Leeds earlier in the summer of this year for a terrarium building workshop, which was not something I imagined would come from a GIS career. But Claudia's already mentioned this, but Esri UK have a close connection with the Outward Bound Trust. So they help young people from disadvantaged backgrounds to have outdoor experiences. So I mean, Claudia's already mentioned this and stolen my thunder a little bit, but to raise funds for this, we went in a battered up Alfa Romeo to take part in the Rusty Rally. So that took us from Aylesbury in the south of England down to Monaco, which was certainly a memorable experience. And again, not what I envisioned when I was setting out on a career in GIS. So that kind of brings me to the end of my story, or to the end of my journey. But I suppose where next? I suppose, like always, I don't really have any grand goals. As you may have gathered, I prefer to kind of think step by step. And at the moment, I'm really enjoying learning about GIS in the role that I'm in, because every project is so different. I'm always learning something new, which I do find really rewarding. Now, I think when I was at university, I thought about having a rewarding career. I thought that meant that work itself had to be rewarding. But don't get me wrong, that is important. But I suppose one part I really didn't think about and have since discovered at Esri UK is how important the company culture is of where you work, and kind of the people that you work with. So yeah, that's kind of my closing remarks. I hope you found that useful. I've only really scratched the surface of what I get up to on a day-to-day basis, but if you do have any questions, then feel free to reach out on LinkedIn.